December 23rd, 2023. I'm standing in my tiny kitchen at 2 a.m., wrapping the last Christmas present with dollar store wrapping paper that keeps tearing. My hands are shaking, not from the cold, but from exhaustion and something that feels dangerously close to hope. 11 months of saving. Every single penny I could squeeze from my teacher's salary, and in less than 48 hours, I'd discover that sometimes the people you love most can break your heart with just 3 words. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss.
My name is Rebecca Martinez, and if you told me last January that I'd be spending Christmas morning questioning everything I thought I knew about my family, I would have laughed. Not because it seemed impossible, but because I was too naive to see the cracks that were already showing. It started on January 3rd, 2023. I was sitting in my 4th grade classroom in Millbrook Elementary, still surrounded by the remnants of holiday decorations that the janitor hadn't taken down yet. The kids were back from winter break, hyped up on leftover candy canes and stories about their Christmas hauls. That's when little Emma Rodriguez raised her hand and asked me what I got for Christmas. I should have deflected, should have turned the question back to them like teachers do. Instead, I found myself admitting that my Christmas had been quiet. Just me, a frozen dinner, and a Hallmark movie marathon. The kids looked at me with this mixture of pity and confusion that 8-year-olds haven't learned to hide yet. But it was Marcus Thompson who really gut-punched me. This kid whose backpack was held together with duct tape, whose lunch was often just a sleeve of crackers, looked at me with genuine concern and said, "Miss Martinez, don't you have a family?" I do have a family. Or at least I thought I did. My older sister, Catherine, lives 20 minutes away in the suburbs with her husband, Derek, and their twin boys, Mason and Logan. She's a nurse practitioner. He's in pharmaceutical sales. They do well for themselves. Really well. Their house is one of those picture-perfect colonials with the circular driveway and the perfectly manicured lawn that somehow stays green even in winter. Then there's my younger brother, Michael. He's 28, works in tech, and splits his time between his downtown loft and whatever exotic location his company sends him to next. Last year, it was Singapore. This year, he spent 3 weeks in Barcelona just because he could. My parents, Linda and Robert Martinez, retired early after selling their landscaping business. They bought a beautiful ranch house in Lakewood Estates, joined the country club, and spend their days playing golf and complaining about property taxes they can easily afford. And then there's me, 32 years old, living in a 1-bedroom apartment above Mrs. Chen's bakery, driving a 2015 Honda Civic with a passenger door that only opens from the inside, and shopping at discount grocery stores with coupons I cut out of the Sunday paper. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I chose teaching. I love teaching. When Kevin Martinez, no relation despite the name, finally grasped long division after weeks of struggle, or when shy Sarah Patterson found the confidence to read aloud for the first time, those moments made every late rent payment worth it. But Marcus Thompson's innocent question hit something deep. When was the last time my family had included me in their Christmas celebrations? Not just invited me, actually included me, made me feel like I belonged. The truth was uncomfortable. The last few Christmases had been perfunctory affairs. I'd show up at Catherine's house with a bottle of wine I could barely afford and some generic gifts from Target's clearance section. I'd sit on the edges of conversations about vacation plans I couldn't join and home renovations I couldn't afford. The kids would show me their expensive new gadgets with genuine excitement, while the adults exchanged gifts that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I was the charity case, the one they tolerated because family is family, but never quite included because what would we have in common? That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to save money all year long and give my family the kind of Christmas they'd never forget. I was going to prove that I belonged, that I could be generous too, that being a teacher didn't mean being less than. I started small. I opened a separate savings account, my Christmas fund, and put $20 in it. $20 that should have gone to my usual Friday night pizza delivery, which meant I ate peanut butter sandwiches instead. By February, I had a system. Every paycheck, before I paid any bills, $25 went into the Christmas fund. It meant saying no to the teacher happy hours at Rosario's bar. It meant buying generic cereal instead of name brand. It meant wearing sweaters inside my apartment instead of turning up the heat. March brought unexpected overtime opportunities. The school district needed substitute teachers for standardized testing, and I volunteered for every single day they offered. 8 extra days at $85 each. $680 went straight into the Christmas fund, even though my car was making that grinding noise that meant I probably need new brakes.
April was tough. The grinding noise became a squealing noise, and I had to choose between fixing my car and maintaining my savings goal. I chose the savings and learned to live with the embarrassment of driving a car that sounded like a dying whale. My coworker Janet offered to lend me money for the repairs, but I couldn't tell her why I was choosing to drive a potentially dangerous vehicle instead of fixing it. By May, I had $437 in my Christmas fund. I felt rich and terrified at the same time. Rich because I'd never saved that much money before in my life. Terrified because I was living so close to the edge that a single unexpected expense could wipe out months of sacrifice. That unexpected expense came in June, in the form of a root canal. $800 that my dental insurance barely dented. I stared at my computer screen for 20 minutes, cursor hovering over the transfer button that would move money from my Christmas fund to my checking account. I didn't do it. Instead, I called the dentist's office and set up a payment plan that would cost me an extra $50 in fees, but would leave my Christmas fund untouched. For 3 months, I lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches while making monthly payments to Dr. Peterson's office. Summer school offered another opportunity. Teaching summer remedial classes paid well, but it meant giving up any chance of a vacation or even a weekend trip. While Catherine posted Instagram photos from their family vacation in the Bahamas, and Michael shared pictures from a music festival in Austin, I spent July and August in a sweltering classroom with broken air conditioning, teaching fractions to kids who'd rather be anywhere else. But those summer school paychecks were golden. By the end of August, my Christmas fund had grown to $893. I felt like Scrooge McDuck swimming in coins. If Scrooge McDuck shopped exclusively at thrift stores and ate expired yogurt because it was half price. September brought new challenges. My landlord, Mr. Kowalski, announced that rent was going up by $150 a month starting in October. $150 I absolutely didn't have. I could either move to a cheaper place, which would mean losing my deposit and paying moving costs I didn't have, or find a way to make it work. I found a way. I started tutoring 3 afternoons a week at the Millbrook Community Center, $15 an hour for helping high school kids with algebra and English. It wasn't much, but it covered the rent increase and added a little extra to my Christmas fund. By October, I was exhausted but determined. My fund had crossed the $1,000 mark, a number that seemed impossibly large and impossibly small at the same time. Large because it represented months of sacrifice. Small because I was starting to plan what I wanted to buy, and I was realizing that generous gifts for 5 family members would require even more. November was crunch time. I picked up every substitute teaching opportunity I could find. I worked at 3 different schools in 5 days, driving my squealing car from Millbrook Elementary to Roosevelt Middle School to Westside High, collecting $78 per day and putting every penny into the fund. I also started selling things. My college textbooks went to an online buyback service for $43. A necklace my ex-boyfriend had given me brought $60 on eBay. I even sold my old smartphone to a pawn shop for $35, downgrading to a flip phone that made me feel like I was living in 2005. The hardest part was keeping it secret.
When Catherine called in late November to discuss Christmas plans, I had to bite my tongue to keep from hinting about what was coming. When Michael texted me a picture of some expensive watch he was considering buying for Dad, I wanted to tell him that I had something special planned too. By December 1st, my Christmas fund held $1,247, more money than I'd ever had in savings in my entire adult life. Money that represented 11 months of sacrifice, planning, and hope. I spent the first 2 weeks of December researching, comparing prices, reading reviews. This wasn't going to be random gifts grabbed from a clearance rack. Every present would be thoughtful, personal, meaningful. For Dad, I found a vintage leather golf bag from the 1970s in pristine condition. The seller was an elderly man in suburban Chicago whose father had owned it but never used it. $230, but it was exactly the kind of unique, high-quality item that Dad would appreciate and treasure. Mom's gift took the longest to find. She'd been talking for years about wanting to learn to paint, but she claimed she was too old to start something new. I found a complete oil painting set from an art supply store that was going out of business. Easel, canvases, brushes, paints, everything a beginner would need. It cost $185, but seeing her face when she opened it would be worth every penny. Catherine was the hardest to shop for because she already had everything. But I remembered her mentioning that she missed the antique jewelry box her grandmother had left her, which had been lost in their move 3 years ago. I found a similar Victorian-era jewelry box at an estate sale in downtown Milwaukee. It wasn't her grandmother's, but it was from the same period, with the same intricate carving and the same little ballerina that spun when you opened it. $312, more than I'd ever spent on a single item for anyone.
Michael's gift was inspired by a conversation we'd had 6 months earlier about his college photography classes and how he missed having a darkroom. I found a vintage Leica camera from the 1960s, fully restored and in working condition. The camera shop owner, Mr. Patel, spent an hour explaining its history and teaching me about its features so I could sound knowledgeable when I gave it to Michael. $428, but it was a piece of photographic history. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off.
For the twins, Mason and Logan, I went with experience gifts. They were 12 now, old enough to appreciate something more meaningful than toys. I bought them each a year-long membership to the Natural History Museum, complete with special behind-the-scenes tours and workshops. $67 each, but they'd been fascinated by dinosaurs since they could walk, and this would give them something to look forward to all year long. By December 20th, I had spent $1,179. Every gift was wrapped and sitting in my living room, transforming my tiny apartment into something that looked almost magical. The presents were beautiful, thoughtful, expensive. They represented not just money, but months of planning and dreaming about the moment when each person would open their gift and realize how much I loved them. I had $68 left over, which felt like a miracle. Enough for gas to drive to Catherine's house on Christmas Day, enough for a nice bottle of wine to bring, and maybe even enough for a pizza to celebrate my success. December 20th, I loaded all the presents into my squealing car and drove to Catherine's house for our family Christmas celebration. My heart was pounding with excitement and nervousness. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. The moment my family would see me differently. I was about to discover that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you sacrifice, some people will always find a way to make you feel small. Catherine's house looked like something out of a magazine. The front yard was decorated with professional-grade lights that probably cost more than my monthly salary. 2 enormous wreaths flanked the front door, and garland wrapped around every pillar and railing. Even their mailbox had a tiny wreath. I parked behind Michael's Tesla. When had he gotten a Tesla? And carefully loaded my arms with presents. The vintage Leica box alone was heavier than I'd expected, and balancing everything while walking up their perfectly shoveled driveway felt like a circus act. Derek answered the door wearing a Christmas sweater that looked like it came from one of those expensive catalog companies. Behind him, I could hear the sounds of family chaos. Kids laughing, adults talking over each other, Christmas music playing just loud enough to create an atmosphere without being intrusive. "Rebecca, you made it!" He took some of the boxes from my arms without really looking at them. Catherine's in the kitchen finishing up the appetizers. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine and something delicious roasting in the oven. Their living room was a masterpiece of holiday decoration. The Christmas tree had to be at least 9 feet tall, covered in ornaments that looked like they belonged in a department store display. Underneath were piles of professionally wrapped presents with elaborate bows and ribbons. My dollar store wrapping paper suddenly felt embarrassingly inadequate. "Aunt Rebecca!" Mason and Logan appeared out of nowhere, both taller than they'd been at Thanksgiving just a month ago. They were wearing matching pajamas, expensive-looking flannel sets that probably cost more than my entire Christmas budget before I started saving. "Hey, guys!" I hugged them both, trying not to think about how their pajamas felt softer than my less work clothes. "How's winter break treating you?" "Dad got us a PlayStation 5. Want to see it?" Before I could answer, they were dragging me toward the family room, where a massive television dominated one wall. The gaming console was set up on a custom entertainment center that looked like it had been built specifically for it. Controllers, games, and accessories were arranged with the kind of organization that screamed expensive hobby. "That's amazing," I said, and I meant it, but I also felt a flutter of anxiety. How do you compete with a PlayStation 5 when you're giving museum memberships? Catherine appeared from the kitchen wearing a flowing red dress that complemented her complexion perfectly. She looked effortless and elegant, the kind of put-together that I could never achieve even when I tried. "Rebecca, I'm so glad you're here." She hugged me, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, something floral and expensive. "How are you, sweetie? You look tired." I probably did look tired. 11 months of financial stress and sacrifice don't exactly promote glowing skin and bright eyes. "I'm good, just excited for Christmas." "Of course you are. Oh, you brought presents. That's so sweet of you. Just put them under the tree with everything else." The way she said everything else made me glance toward their Christmas tree again. There had to be 30 or 40 presents under there, all wrapped in coordinating paper that looked like it came from an expensive boutique. Ribbons that weren't crinkled, bows that weren't lopsided. Mom and Dad arrived 20 minutes later, and the house felt suddenly complete. Dad was carrying a bottle of wine that I recognized from restaurant menus, something in the $40 range. Mom had a covered dish that smelled like her famous green bean casserole, the one she only made for special occasions.
"There's our teacher." Dad wrapped me in one of his bear hugs that always made me feel 7 years old again. "How's the school year treating you?" "Really well. My kids are great this year." I wanted to tell him about Emma Rodriguez finally mastering her multiplication tables, or about quiet David Chin, who'd started raising his hand in class, but family gatherings weren't usually the place for work stories. Michael was the last to arrive, appearing at the front door like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine. His coat probably cost more than my car was worth, and he was carrying a leather bag that looked like it could pay my rent for 3 months. "Sorry, I'm late," he announced to everyone. "Flight from Denver was delayed." Denver. Right. He'd been in Denver for work, or maybe pleasure. With Michael, it was hard to tell the difference. He'd mentioned something about skiing in Aspen during our last phone conversation, but I'd stopped following the details of his travel schedule because it just made me feel worse about my own life. Dinner was incredible. Catherine had outdone herself with prime rib, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables that looked like they belonged in a cooking magazine. The dining room table was set with china I remembered from childhood, Mom's good set that only came out for major holidays. The conversation flowed around me like water around a rock.
Michael talked about his latest promotion and the company retreat in Switzerland. Catherine shared updates about Derek's latest work project and the boys' progress in school. Mom and Dad discussed their plans for a Mediterranean cruise they'd booked for February. I contributed when I could, agreeing with opinions, asking follow-up questions, laughing at the right moments. But mostly I listened and tried not to think about the fact that everyone else's casual mentions of money involved amounts that would solve my biggest problems. "What about you, Rebecca?" Derek asked during a lull in conversation. "Any exciting plans for the new year?" "Just the usual. Spring semester starts January 8th, so I'll be busy with lesson planning and getting back into the routine." "That's nice," Catherine said, in the tone people use when they're being polite but not particularly interested. "Are you still living above that bakery?" "Mrs. Chin's place, yeah. It's convenient for work." I didn't mention that it was also the only apartment I could afford, or that Mrs. Chin had become like a surrogate grandmother, always checking on me and occasionally leaving leftover pastries by my door. "You know," Mom said carefully, "if you ever wanted to go back to school for administration or counseling, Dad and I could help with some of the costs." It was a kind offer, and I knew it came from love. But it also carried the implication that what I was doing wasn't quite enough, that I should want more, be more. Everyone at this table had advanced degrees or successful careers that paid well. I was the only one who'd chosen a path that prioritized service over salary. "I love teaching," I said firmly. "I can't imagine doing anything else." "Of course," Dad said quickly. "We're proud of what you do. Teachers are so important." The conversation moved on to other topics, but I caught the look that passed between my parents. The same look I'd been seeing for years. Love mixed with worry, pride mixed with concern about my financial future. After dinner, we moved to the living room for presents. This was the moment I'd been dreaming about for 11 months. My heart was racing as Catherine started distributing gifts. The family had a system for present opening that I'd forgotten about. Youngest to oldest, one person at a time, so everyone could watch and appreciate each gift. It was civilized and organized, nothing like the chaos of Christmas mornings when we were kids. Mason went first, opening a series of increasingly expensive presents: video games, designer clothes, a new skateboard that looked like it belonged in a professional competition. Each gift was received with appropriate enthusiasm and thanks. Logan's pile was equally impressive. More games, a drone with a camera, sports equipment from brands I recognized from commercials. The boys were gracious and polite, hugging their parents after each present, but there was also something casual about their reactions. This level of generosity was normal for them. Derek opened gifts from Catherine: cologne, a watch, tickets to some sporting event I'd never heard of. Catherine's gifts from Derek were equally thoughtful and expensive: jewelry, a spa day package, a designer handbag. Michael's presents were the kind of things people buy when money isn't a consideration. Dad had gotten him a leather jacket that looked like it cost more than my car. Mom gave him a framed photo from their last family vacation, the one to Napa Valley that I couldn't afford to join.
My parents exchanged gifts with the comfort of people who've been married for 35 years and know each other's tastes perfectly. Dad gave Mom a pair of earrings that made her eyes light up. Mom gave Dad golf accessories that he immediately pronounced perfect.
Then it was my turn to receive. I opened Catherine's gift first, a gift card to Target, $50, which was generous by my standards but felt somehow perfunctory in the context of everything else I'd watched being unwrapped. Michael had given me a book about classroom management techniques. It was thoughtful in its way, showing that he'd paid attention to what I do for work. But it was also clearly something he'd picked up at an airport bookstore during one of his business trips. My parents' gift was the most personal: a framed photo of all of us from last Christmas, along with a matching scarf and glove set. Mom had clearly put thought into choosing the color, and the accessories were warm and practical. I thanked everyone sincerely because the gifts were kind and the thought behind them mattered. But I also couldn't help noticing the difference in scale. Everything I'd received could have been purchased in a single afternoon for less than $200. Everything everyone else had received represented significantly more investment, both financial and emotional. Now it was my turn to give. I started with the twins, partly because I was most confident about their reactions. The museum memberships were unique, educational, and came with special privileges that money usually couldn't buy. Mason opened his first, reading the certificate with a confused expression. "It's a membership?" "To the Natural History Museum," I explained, my excitement building. "It includes behind-the-scenes tours, special workshops, and unlimited visits for a whole year. You love dinosaurs, so I thought..." "Oh." Mason looked at the certificate again, then at his parents. "Thanks, Aunt Rebecca." Logan's reaction was similar. Polite thanks, but not the enthusiasm I had expected. The dinosaur obsession I remembered from their younger years had apparently faded, replaced with interests I hadn't kept up with. Catherine accepted her Victorian jewelry box with more genuine warmth. She examined the intricate carving, opened it to see the little ballerina spin, and made appropriate appreciative noises. But I could see her calculating the cost versus the practicality, wondering where she'd put it in her perfectly organized house. Michael's vintage Leica camera generated the most interest. He handled it carefully, asked knowledgeable questions about its history and condition, and seemed genuinely impressed by the craftsmanship. For a moment, I felt the validation I'd been craving all year. "This is really cool, Rebecca. Where did you find it?" "A camera shop downtown. The owner restored it himself. I remember you talking about missing darkroom photography, so I thought, yeah, that's thoughtful. I haven't touched film photography in years, though. Everything's digital now." He was still examining the camera, but I could hear the subtle shift in his tone. Appreciation mixed with mild confusion about why I'd chosen something so impractical. Dad's vintage golf bag was received with hearty thanks and immediate plans to use it next weekend. Mom's painting set generated excitement about finally having time to explore art. Both reactions felt genuine and warm. But as I watched my family examine their gifts, I started to notice something that made my stomach clench with growing dread. They were being polite, grateful, appropriate. They weren't being amazed. Catherine was the first to say it after everyone had finished opening presents and we were sitting surrounded by wrapping paper and ribbon. "Well, that was lovely. Thank you all for such thoughtful gifts." She was looking around the room with the satisfied expression of someone whose Christmas had gone exactly as expected. Then she turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Rebecca, sweetie, that's all?" The words hung in the air like smoke from a blown-out candle. "That's all?" I felt my face flush hot, then cold. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm, too bright. Everyone was looking at me with expressions ranging from Catherine's expectant smile to Michael's uncomfortable glance toward the ceiling. "I'm sorry," I managed to say, though I'd heard her perfectly. "The gifts, honey. That's everything you brought?" Catherine's tone was still light, conversational, as if she were asking about the weather. "Those gifts cost me over $1,000, Catherine."
The silence that followed was deafening. Dad cleared his throat. Mom suddenly became very interested in folding wrapping paper. The twins, sensing adult tension with the precision kids develop early, quietly excused themselves to go play with their new PlayStation. Michael was the first to speak. $1,000? Rebecca, you didn't need to... Need what? I cut him off. Need to spend money I don't have to buy you things you don't want? Need to save all year just to prove I belong in this family? Catherine's expression shifted from confusion to something that looked like pity. "Oh, sweetie, nobody asked you to spend that much money. We would have been happy with anything." "Anything." I repeated the word like it was poisonous. "Like the $50 gift card you gave me?" "Rebecca," Dad's voice carried the warning tone from childhood, the one that meant I was approaching a line I shouldn't cross. But I was already across it.
11 months of bottled up resentment and hurt feelings were spilling out like water from a broken dam. Do you know what I gave up to buy those presents? Do you have any idea what my life has been like this year? I ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day for 3 months. I drove a car that sounded like it was dying because I couldn't afford to fix it. I worked 3 jobs to save money for Christmas presents that apparently aren't enough. Catherine's face was flushing now, too. Nobody forced you to do any of that. We never asked. You didn't have to ask. I was on my feet now, pacing in front of their perfect Christmas tree. You just exist with your perfect house and your perfect lives and your Mediterranean cruises and your Tesla and your designer everything. And I'm the poor teacher's sister who lives above a bakery and shops with coupons. That's not fair, Michael said quietly. Nobody thinks less of you because you're a teacher. I whirled around to face him. Don't they? When was the last time anyone in this family asked about my life without it sounding like pity? When was the last time anyone acted like what I do matters? Your job matters, Mom said carefully. Teaching is important work, but it doesn't pay enough to matter to this family, does it? It doesn't pay enough for me to join your vacation to Napa Valley. It doesn't pay enough for me to relate to your conversations about property taxes and investment portfolios and which private school is better for the boys. Derek, who had been silent through all of this, finally spoke up. Rebecca, I think you might be overreacting. Overreacting? I turned to him, this man who drove a BMW and complained about his country club membership fees. Your wife just looked at a year's worth of my salary and asked if that was all? How exactly should I be reacting? Catherine stood up, her own composure finally cracking. I didn't mean it like that, and you know it. I just thought, I don't know what I thought, but you can't blame us for your financial problems. I'm not blaming you for my financial problems. I'm blaming you for making me feel like garbage about them. The room fell silent again. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, the dishwasher running in the kitchen, the sound of the twins' video game from the family room. Dad cleared his throat again. Maybe we should all take a breath here. No, I shook my head. I don't want to take a breath. I want to say this because I've been thinking about it for years and I'm tired of pretending everything is fine. I looked around the room at my family. These people I'd sacrificed so much to impress, to belong with, to matter to. I spent 11 months eating ramen noodles and wearing sweaters inside because I couldn't afford to heat my apartment properly. I sold my jewelry and my textbooks and my old phone. I worked every weekend and holiday tutoring kids and substitute teaching. I did all of that because I wanted to give you the kind of Christmas presents you give each other. My voice was shaking now, but I kept going. And you know what the worst part is? It's not that you didn't like the gifts. It's not even that Catherine asked if that was all. It's that none of you noticed. None of you wondered how a teacher living in a 1-bedroom apartment above a bakery managed to buy a $300 antique jewelry box and a $400 vintage camera. None of you asked where the money came from or what it might have cost me to get it. Michael was staring at his hands. Catherine had tears in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from hurt or anger. Because if you had asked, if any of you had paid attention to my actual life instead of just feeling sorry for it, you might have realized that those gifts represented everything I had, everything I saved, everything I sacrificed. They weren't just presents, they were proof that I love you enough to go without things I need just to make you happy. Mom was crying now, quietly, the way she cried at movies when she thought no one was watching. But that doesn't matter to you, does it? Because they're not expensive enough. They're not impressive enough. They're not enough. I grabbed my purse from the chair where I had left it. Then I stopped and turned back. You know what? Keep the gifts. Donate them, sell them, throw them away. I don't care. But don't pretend they came from someone who matters to this family because both of us know that's not true. Rebecca, don't leave like this, Dad called after me, but I was already grabbing my coat from the closet, already walking out the door into the cold December air. Behind me, I could hear Catherine crying and Michael saying something about going after me, but I didn't stop. My car was still making that awful squealing noise when I started it, but for the first time all year, I didn't care. Let it squeal. Let it die on the side of the road. It would just be one more thing I couldn't afford to fix. One more reminder of all the ways my life didn't measure up to my family's expectations. I drove home through empty Christmas evening streets, past houses glowing with warm light, and families gathered around their own Christmas trees. In some of those houses, maybe there were other people like me. People who'd sacrifice more than they should have for the chance to matter to someone they loved. Back in my tiny apartment above Mrs. Chen's bakery, I sat on my secondhand couch and stared at the small Christmas tree I'd bought for myself at the grocery store on December 22nd for $15. It was decorated with ornaments I'd collected over the years, mostly handmade gifts from students, a few pieces from my childhood that Mom had given me when she redecorated.
It wasn't much, but it was mine, and nobody had looked at it and asked if that was all. My phone buzzed with text messages, first from Michael, "Rebecca, please come back, let's talk about this." Then from Mom, "Honey, we love you, come home." Finally from Catherine, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it the way it sounded." But she had meant it exactly the way it sounded. We all knew it. I turned off my phone and made myself a cup of tea with the cheap tea bags I'd been buying all year. It tasted fine. It was warm and comforting, and it was what I could afford. For the first time in 11 months, that felt like enough. I woke up on December 26th with a headache that felt like someone had been using my skull as a drum set. The apartment was cold. I had forgotten to turn the heat up before falling asleep on the couch, and gray winter light was filtering through the thin curtains I'd bought at a thrift store 3 years ago. My phone was still turned off from the night before, sitting on the coffee table like a small black bomb waiting to explode. I knew there would be more messages, probably voicemails too. The Martinez family didn't let conflicts fester. We talked things out, we made amends, we moved forward. Except this time felt different. Mrs. Chen was already bustling around downstairs in her bakery. I could hear the familiar sounds of mixing bowls and oven doors, the routine that started every morning at 4 a.m., whether it was Christmas, Sunday, or the middle of a blizzard. The smell of fresh bread was drifting up through the floorboards, a comfort I'd grown to associate with home more than any childhood memory. I made coffee with the cheap grounds I'd been buying all year and sat at my tiny kitchen table looking at the stack of bills that had arrived the day before Christmas. Electric bill, student loan payment, car insurance, credit card minimum payment from the dental work. The usual suspects that would eat up most of my next paycheck and leave me counting pennies again. But for the first time in months, I wasn't calculating how much money I could squeeze out for savings. The Christmas fund was gone, spent, transformed into gifts that my family had received with polite disappointment. There was something liberating about not having that pressure anymore, even if it meant acknowledging that my grand gesture had been a complete failure. A soft knock on my door interrupted my financial brooding. Mrs. Chen stood in the hallway holding a plate covered with a clean kitchen towel. "Rebecca, dear, I heard you come home late last night. Everything okay?" Mrs. Chen was 73 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and had the uncanny ability to see through any lie I'd ever attempted to tell her. She'd been like a grandmother to me since I moved into the apartment, always checking on me, always ready with leftover pastries or unsolicited but accurate life advice. Christmas was complicated, I admitted, accepting the plate. The towel was warm and I could smell cinnamon and sugar underneath. Family often is. She stepped into my apartment without invitation, the way she did when she sensed I needed company. "My David called yesterday. Lives in California now. Makes lots of money doing something with computers. You know what he asked me?" I shook my head, lifting the towel to reveal fresh cinnamon rolls that were still warm from the oven. He asked if I needed anything, money for repairs, money for a vacation, money for a newer car. Such a good boy, always worried about his old mother. She settled into my other kitchen chair like she belonged there. But you know what he didn't ask? What? He didn't ask about the bakery, didn't ask if I still enjoy making bread every morning, or if Mrs. Patterson's granddaughter still comes by for chocolate croissants after school. He didn't ask about my life, just about my needs. I took a bite of the cinnamon roll. It was perfect, sweet and buttery, and tasting like decades of practice. Mrs. Chen, this is incredible. Of course it is. I've been making them since before you were born. She waved away the compliment with flour-dusted fingers. But listen to what I'm telling you. Love and money, they get confused sometimes. People think if they give you enough money, they've given you enough love. People think if they don't have money to give, they can't give love. I thought about Catherine's $50 gift card, chosen without thought or personal connection. I thought about my own year of sacrifice, trying to prove love through expensive gifts that my family couldn't appreciate because they'd never learned to see the sacrifice behind them. Sometimes, Mrs. Chen continued, the people who love us most are the ones who see us exactly as we are. Not what we could be with more money, not what we should be with different choices, just who we are right now, today. After she left, I finally turned on my phone. 17 text messages, 6 voicemails, and 3 missed calls. Most were from family members. But there was also a message from my friend Janet from school. Hey girl, hope you had a good Christmas. Want to grab coffee tomorrow and hear all about your family drama? I know there's always drama. Call me when you get this. Janet was the only person in my life who knew the real details of my financial situation, partly because we'd been teaching at the same school for 4 years, and partly because she had her own struggles with student loans and a teacher's salary. She was also the only person who'd ever suggested that maybe my family's wealth created problems I didn't want to acknowledge. I called her back. Rebecca, how did the great Christmas gift reveal go? Did your sister cry tears of joy over whatever expensive thing you bought her? She asked if that was all? Silence on the other end of the line. Then she said, what now? I told her everything. The year of saving, the careful gift selection, the awkward dinner conversation, Catherine's question, and my subsequent meltdown. Janet listened without interrupting, making occasional noises of disbelief and sympathy. So now what? She asked when I finished. I guess I figure out how to face them again. Everyone's been texting, wanting to work things out and talk about what happened. Do you want to work things out? The question caught me off guard. I'd assumed that of course I wanted to work things out. They were my family. You don't just cut off your family because of one bad Christmas. I don't know, I said honestly. I keep thinking about what I said to them, and I don't think I was wrong, but I also don't know how to go back to pretending everything is fine. Maybe you don't go back, you go forward to something different, Janet suggested. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went for a walk without a destination or purpose. No errands to run, no money to save, no specific goal to achieve. Just a walk through my neighborhood on a quiet December afternoon. Millbrook wasn't the fanciest part of town. The houses were smaller, older, many of them converted into apartments or small businesses. But it was alive in a way that Catherine's suburban neighborhood wasn't. Mrs. Patterson was sweeping her front steps and waved when she saw me. The Garcia family was having some kind of celebration in their backyard with music and children's laughter carrying over the fence. I walked past the community center where I tutored 3 afternoons a week, past the corner store where I bought my groceries, past the elementary school where I spent my days. This was my life, my world, my community. It wasn't glamorous or wealthy, but it was real. My phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. Hi, I answered, not sure what else to say. Rebecca, thank God you answered. We've all been worried sick. You don't need to worry about me. Of course we need to worry about you. You're our sister. You stormed out of Christmas dinner after what happened. What happened? Like it was some natural disaster that had befallen us, rather than the inevitable result of years of thoughtless treatment. Michael, what did you want me to say?
Catherine asked if that was all, and it was. That was everything I had to give. She feels terrible about how that came out. We all do. How did it came out? I stopped walking. So the problem is how she said it, not what she meant? That's not... Rebecca, nobody meant to hurt your feelings. We just didn't realize... Didn't realize what? That I'm poor? That teachers don't make much money? That I live in a tiny apartment and drive a car that's falling apart? Because I'm pretty sure that's been obvious for years. Didn't realize how much those gifts meant to you, he said quietly. And there it was. The fundamental disconnect that had been building for years. To them, gifts were just things you bought and gave. To me, those gifts had been proof of love, evidence of belonging, a year's worth of sacrifice transformed into something tangible. They meant everything to me, Michael, and you all received them like they were consolation prizes. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time anyone in our family was genuinely excited about something I gave them? When was the last time anyone asked about my life in a way that suggested they actually wanted to know the answer? He was quiet for a long moment. You're right, he said finally. We haven't been good at including you, but that doesn't mean we don't love you. I know you love me, but love isn't enough if it doesn't come with respect. We respect you. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you all see me as the family member who needs help, not the family member who has anything valuable to contribute. Another silence. In the background, I could hear voices. He was probably still at Catherine's house, probably having this conversation while the rest of them were listening. What do you want from us, Rebecca? How do we fix this? It was a reasonable question, and I wished I had a reasonable answer. But the truth was, I didn't know how to fix years of feeling like an outsider in my own family. I didn't know how to bridge the gap between their financial comfort and my constant worry about money. I didn't know how to make them see me as an equal rather than a charity case. I want you to see me, I said finally. Really see me. Not the poor teacher who needs help, not the sister who can't afford nice things. Just me, Rebecca, who chose a job she loves even though it doesn't pay well, who lives in a small apartment because it's what she can afford and it's fine, who doesn't need to be fixed or rescued or pitied. We don't pity you. Yes, you do. You all do. And I've been so desperate to prove that I belong that I spent a year making myself miserable trying to match your lifestyle instead of just being proud of my own. When we hung up, I felt exhausted, but also strangely relieved. The conversation hadn't solved anything, but it had clarified something important. I couldn't go back to pretending that everything was fine. Too much had been said, too much had been revealed. That evening, I sat down with my laptop and did something I hadn't done in years. I looked at my finances without shame or apology. Yes, I lived paycheck to paycheck. Yes, I had student loans and a car that needed repairs and an apartment that wasn't much to look at. But I also had a job I loved, a boss who valued my work, kids who learned something new every day because of my teaching. I had Mrs. Chen, who checked on me and brought me warm pastries. I had Janet, who understood the reality of living on a teacher's salary. I had the Garcia family next door who invited me to their barbecues and asked for help with their kids' homework. I had a life that was small and imperfect and entirely my own. For the first time in 11 months, that felt like more than enough. It felt like everything. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange bubble of normalcy. School was closed for winter break, which meant my days had no structure beyond the routine I created for myself. I slept until 8 a.m. instead of 6. I read books I'd been meaning to get to for months. I organized my tiny apartment and actually cooked real meals instead of grabbing whatever was quickest and cheapest. But mostly, I thought about my family, about my life, about the choices that had led me to spend Christmas evening crying alone in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. The calls and texts from my family had slowed to a trickle. Mom sent daily messages, thinking of you, honey, and love you always, but nothing that demanded a response. Dad called once and left a voicemail that was mostly awkward silence, punctuated by a mumbled, "Just wanted to make sure you're okay, sweetheart." Catherine sent one text on December 28th. "I've been thinking about what you said. You're right about some things. Can we talk when you're ready?" Michael had gone back to Denver, or maybe Seattle? I'd stopped tracking his travel schedule years ago. His last message was characteristically direct. "I am here when you want to figure this out." I wasn't ready to figure anything out. Not yet. Instead, I did something I'd never done in my adult life. I spent money on myself without guilt. Not much money, I wasn't delusional about my budget, but enough to feel like a small rebellion against the year of deprivation I'd just endured. I bought real coffee beans instead of the generic instant I'd been drinking. I ordered pizza on Friday night instead of making another peanut butter sandwich. I went to the bookstore and bought 2 new novels at full price. No used copies or library holds required. It was a revelation. The coffee tasted better than anything I'd had in months. The pizza was perfect, greasy comfort food that I ate while reading one of my new books. The novels were crisp and new, their spines unbroken, their pages unmarked by previous readers. These small luxuries cost me maybe $60 total. $60 that, a month ago, would have felt like a fortune. Now, it felt like basic human dignity. On December 30th, I was grading final exams from the semester. Yes, I know, working during winter break, but the papers wouldn't grade themselves. When someone knocked on my door, not the soft, familiar knock of Mrs. Chen, but something more hesitant. I opened the door to find Catherine standing in the hallway, holding a covered dish and looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen her. "Hi," I said.
Hi. I didn't move to let her in, partly because I was genuinely surprised, and partly because I wasn't sure I was ready for this conversation. "I brought you some of Mom's leftover green bean casserole. I know you like it." She held out the dish like a peace offering. I accepted it because it would have been rude not to, but also because I did love Mom's green bean casserole and hadn't eaten a home-cooked meal prepared by someone else in longer than I cared to admit. "Thank you. Do you want to come in?" Catherine looked around my apartment with what I initially thought was judgment, but realized was actually curiosity. She'd never been here before. In 4 years of living above Mrs. Chen's bakery, not one member of my family had visited my home. "It's cozy," she said, and I could tell she was choosing her words carefully. "It's small," I corrected, "but it works for me." She sat on my secondhand couch, still looking around. I followed her gaze, trying to see the space through her eyes, the mismatched furniture I'd collected over the years, the art on the walls, mostly things my students had made for me, along with a few prints I'd bought at the college art fair. The bookshelf was made of boards and cinder blocks that held my teaching materials and personal reading. It wasn't much by Catherine's standards, but it was mine. And for the first time, I wasn't apologizing for it, even silently. "Rebecca, I need to apologize." I settled into the chair across from her, the only other piece of furniture in my living room, and waited. "I need to apologize for years of not seeing you, really seeing you." "Okay." "I've been thinking about what you said about how we treat you like a charity case. And you're right, we do. I do. I've always thought I was being helpful, offering to pay for things, suggesting you should go back to school, talking about your situation like it was a problem to be solved. It felt like you all thought my life was a mistake I'd made that needed fixing." "God, Rebecca, that's exactly what we thought. And that's so incredibly arrogant and wrong, and I'm sorry. It was the apology I'd been waiting for, but hearing it didn't bring the relief I'd expected. Instead, it just made me sad for both of us,
for all the years we'd spent misunderstanding each other. Catherine, why didn't you ever ask me if I was happy? The question seemed to catch her off guard. What do you mean? In all these years of worrying about my money and my apartment and my car, did you ever wonder if I was actually happy with my life? She was quiet for a long time. I guess I assumed you couldn't be. Happy, I mean. Living paycheck to paycheck, worrying about bills, not being able to afford the things the rest of us take for granted. But you never asked. No, I never asked. I got up and made us both tea, the good tea I'd bought myself as part of my post-Christmas rebellion. While the water boiled, I thought about how to explain something I'd never fully articulated, even to myself. I love my job, Catherine. Not just like it, not just find it fulfilling. I love it. I love watching kids learn to read, seeing them get excited about math problems, helping shy kids find their voices. I love the chaos of the classroom and the quiet moments when everything clicks for a student who's been struggling. I brought the tea back to the living room and handed her a mug. I chose this life. Not because I couldn't do anything else, not because I wasn't smart enough for law school or medical school or business school. I chose it because it's what I wanted to do with my time on Earth. But don't you want more? The question came out before she could stop it, and I could see her immediately regret it. More what? More money? Sure, that would be nice. More space? Maybe. But more meaning? More purpose? More connection to something that matters? I already have that. Catherine stared into her tea. I don't think I've ever asked myself what would make me happy. I just followed the path I was supposed to follow. Good grades, good college, good job, good marriage, good kids. I never questioned whether any of it was what I actually wanted.
It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. "Are you happy?" I asked. "I don't know. I think I'm comfortable, successful, but happy?" She shrugged. "Derek and I barely talk anymore, unless it's about the kids' schedules or the mortgage or whose turn it is to deal with whatever household crisis has emerged. I spend most of my days at work dealing with other people's medical problems, then come home and manage everyone else's schedules and needs. When do I get to think about what I want?" We sat in silence for a while, sipping our tea and processing the weight of the conversation. This was more honest communication than Catherine and I had shared in years, maybe ever. "I need to tell you something else," she said eventually, "about the gifts you gave us." My stomach tightened. I thought we'd moved past the gift debacle, but apparently not. "Derek spent an hour researching that jewelry box after you left. It's from 1892, made by a craftsman in Boston who only produced about 50 pieces in his entire career. It's worth significantly more than what you paid for it." I hadn't known that. The estate sales seller had just told me it was Victorian and beautiful. And Michael's camera? He called a friend of his who collects vintage photography equipment. It's a 1965 Leica M3. Apparently, one of the most sought-after models ever made. In the condition you found it, it's worth at least twice what you paid. "Catherine, I don't understand what you're telling me. I'm telling you that you have incredible taste and instincts, and you found treasures that we were too stupid to recognize. Dad's been carrying that golf bag everywhere, showing it off to anyone who'll listen. Mom has already signed up for 3 different art classes and bought enough supplies to stock a small studio." She set down her mug and looked at me directly. "And the twins? They've been to the museum 4 times since Christmas. Mason asked Derek to sign him up for the Young Naturalist program, and Logan wants to volunteer there next summer. You gave them something we never could have, a passion for learning about the natural world." I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. "But you all seemed so disappointed." "We were surprised. None of us expected such thoughtful, personal gifts from anyone, really. We're used to expensive gifts that don't require much thought. Gift cards and jewelry and gadgets. We don't know how to react when someone gives us something that shows they actually know us." "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." "It is, isn't it?" Catherine laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "We've become people who don't know how to appreciate genuine thoughtfulness because we're so used to measuring everything by price tags."
She set down her mug and looked at me directly. Rebecca, I want you to know that I understand now why you were so angry. It wasn't really about the money or the gifts. It was about feeling invisible in your own family. Yeah, it was. I can't promise we'll all change overnight. These patterns, they're pretty deeply ingrained. But I want to try. I want to know you better. The real you, not the version of you I've been projecting my own fears onto. After she left, I sat in my small living room with Mom's green bean casserole warming on the stove and thought about forgiveness. Not the quick surface-level forgiveness that families often rush toward to avoid discomfort, but the deeper kind that requires fundamental changes in how people treat each other. I wasn't ready for that yet, but for the first time since Christmas, I thought it might be there someday. That night, I called Janet. "How are you holding up?" she asked immediately. "Better, I think. Catherine came by today." "And?" And she apologized. Really apologized. Not just for what she said, but for years of treating me like I needed to be rescued from my own life. That's good, right? It's a start. But Janet, I've been thinking about something you said. About going forward instead of going back. Yeah?
What if I stopped trying to fit into their version of family and started building relationships with them based on who I actually am? That sounds terrifying and healthy. It does, doesn't it? I spent New Year's Eve alone, by choice. I made myself a good dinner, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, and watched the countdown on television. When midnight struck and fireworks lit up the sky outside my window, I made a resolution that had nothing to do with losing weight or saving money or improving myself in any conventional way. I resolved to stop apologizing for the life I'd chosen. I resolved to stop measuring my worth by my family's standards. I resolved to build a year where I could be genuinely proud of who I was, not who I thought I should be. It felt like the most radical thing I'd ever done. January 8th arrived with the familiar chaos of returning to school after winter break. My fourth graders burst through the classroom door like they'd been shot from cannons, full of stories about Christmas presents and family vacations, and the mysterious way 2 weeks of freedom had somehow made them forget how to sit in chairs properly. Miss Martinez, guess what I got for Christmas? Emma Rodriguez was practically vibrating with excitement as she bounced beside my desk. Tell me everything, I said, and I meant it. This was what I'd missed during the break, the pure, uncomplicated joy of children who found wonder in everything from new crayons to snow days. As my students settled into their seats and began the ritual of reconnecting after time apart, I realized something had fundamentally shifted in me over the past 2 weeks. I wasn't performing happiness or pretending enthusiasm. I was genuinely glad to be here, in this classroom, with these kids, doing this work that I'd chosen. Miss Martinez, you look different, announced Marcus Thompson, the same kid whose innocent question about family had started my year-long journey of financial sacrifice. Did you get a haircut? I touched my hair self-consciously. It was the same as always, brown, shoulder lengths, held back with whatever hair tie I could find in my purse. No haircut. Maybe I just had a good winter break. Did you go somewhere exciting? Asked Sarah Patterson, my formerly shy student who now participated eagerly in class discussions. I stayed right here in Millbrook. Sometimes the best vacations happen at home. It wasn't a lie. I had discovered something valuable during those quiet days between Christmas and New Year's, the difference between being alone and being lonely, between having little money and feeling poor, between a small life and an insignificant one. The morning flew by in the usual blur of math lessons and reading groups. During lunch, while my students ate in the cafeteria, I sat in my classroom grading papers and eating the sandwich I'd packed, turkey and cheese on actual bread instead of the peanut butter and crackers that had sustained me for months. Janet knocked on my doorframe. "How's the first day back treating you?" "Good. Really good, actually." I looked up from the stack of math worksheets. I missed this more than I realized. "You're surprised?"
I think I'd forgotten that I actually love my job. This year, I was so focused on what I couldn't afford and what I couldn't give my family that I lost sight of what I could do here. Janet sat down in one of my student desks, her knees comically high. Speaking of family, any word from the Martinez clan? Catherine and I talked on New Year's Day. Nothing earth-shattering, just checking in. But it felt different, more honest, maybe. That's progress. It is. But Janet, I've been thinking about something else too. Remember how you said I should consider going forward instead of going back? Yeah. What if I applied that to more than just my family? What if I stopped spending so much energy on what I can't afford and started investing in what I can actually influence? Janet raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously like personal growth. Are you feeling okay? I laughed, throwing a pencil eraser at her. I'm serious. Look at this classroom, these kids. I spend 8 hours a day here, 5 days a week. What if I made this space even better? What if I stopped worrying about keeping up with my family's lifestyle and started building something meaningful right here? That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I stopped by the teacher's supply store after work, not to window shop or calculate how much things cost that I couldn't afford, but to actually buy supplies for my classroom. I had $68 left over from my Christmas fund, money I'd almost forgotten about in the aftermath of the holiday disaster. $68 wasn't much by my family standards, but it could transform my classroom in small, meaningful ways. I bought new books for my reading corner, colorful pens for grading student work, and a set of educational posters that would make learning multiplication tables more engaging. I also bought a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest teacher," a small joke for myself that felt like a declaration of self-acceptance. As I loaded my purchases into my squealing car, my phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen. Hi, Dad. Rebecca, honey, how was your first day back? It was a simple question, but it was the first time in months that someone in my family had asked about my work in a way that suggested genuine interest rather than polite obligation. It was great. The kids were excited to be back, and I realized how much I'd missed teaching. That's wonderful. I know how much you love those kids. We talked for 20 minutes, really talked, about my students' personalities, about the new curriculum I was implementing, and about the challenges and rewards of teaching fourth grade. Dad asked follow-up questions, remembered details from previous conversations, and never once suggested that I should consider a different career path. When we hung up, I sat in my car in the teacher supply store parking lot and cried a little. Not from sadness, but from relief. This was what I'd been craving from my family, not expensive gifts or financial help, but recognition that my work mattered and that my choices had value. 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. I was in the middle of a lesson about fractions when Principal Henderson knocked on my classroom door. Miss Martinez, could I speak with you for a moment? My students immediately perked up with the universal excitement children feel when their teacher gets called to the principal's office. I followed Mrs. Henderson into the hallway, my mind racing through possible infractions or issues. Rebecca, I've just gotten off the phone with the district office. They're looking for teachers to participate in a pilot program for gifted and talented education. The stipend is significant, and it would involve developing a curriculum that could be implemented across multiple schools. My heart started beating faster. What kind of stipend?
$1,500 for the semester, plus professional development opportunities and the chance to present your work at the state education conference. $1,500, more money than I'd saved in my entire Christmas fund, money that could fix my car, build up my emergency fund, or simply give me breathing room in my monthly budget. Why are you offering this to me? Mrs. Henderson smiled. Because you're one of the most creative and dedicated teachers I've worked with. Your students consistently show growth, you find innovative ways to engage kids who struggle, and frankly, you deserve recognition for the work you're already doing. I accepted the opportunity immediately. That evening, I called Michael to share the news. We'd been texting occasionally since New Year's. Nothing deep or dramatic, just the gradual rebuilding of normal sibling communication. Rebecca, that's incredible. Congratulations. Thank you. I'm actually really excited about it.
It's a chance to work with other teachers, develop new materials, maybe influence education policy on a small scale. You sound happy. I am happy. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I've been meaning to tell you something. Remember that camera you gave me for Christmas? My stomach tightened slightly. We hadn't talked about the gifts since Catherine's visit. I've been using it. Started taking pictures again for the first time since college. There's something about film photography that's different from digital, more intentional, more thoughtful. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed it. Really? Really? And Rebecca, I'm sorry it took me so long to appreciate what you gave me. Not just the camera, but the reminder that there are things I used to love that I'd let go of. After we hung up, I realized something had shifted in our relationship too. We weren't talking around my financial situation or his success or the gap between our lifestyles. We were just talking about work, about interests, about life. March brought spring to Millbrook, and with it, a sense of renewal that felt deeply personal. My car had finally been repaired. The stipend from the pilot program had covered the brake work and some additional maintenance that made driving a much quieter, safer experience. I'd also been able to put money in savings without sacrificing basic necessities. But the most significant change was in my relationship with money itself. I no longer viewed my budget as a source of shame or limitation. Instead, it had become a tool for making intentional choices about what mattered to me. I bought groceries without calculating every penny, but I also didn't buy things I didn't need. I splurged on good coffee and real cheese, but I still used coupons and shopped sales. I treated myself to dinner out once a week, usually at local places where I could afford to tip well. Most importantly, I stopped comparing my financial situation to my family's. Catherine drove a BMW. I drove a Honda Civic that ran reliably. Michael lived in a downtown loft. I lived above a bakery where the smell of fresh bread greeted me every morning. They went on expensive vacations. I found joy in weekend trips to state parks and free museums. Different didn't mean lesser. In April, something beautiful happened. Mason and Logan, my twin nephews, asked if they could visit my apartment. Catherine called to make the request, sounding almost as surprised as I felt. They've been talking about your place ever since I described it. I think they're curious about how you live. The boys arrived on a Saturday afternoon, full of 12-year-old energy and genuine curiosity. They examined everything in my small space with the intensity of anthropologists discovering a new culture. You have so many books, Mason observed, running his finger along my improvised bookshelf. Do you read all of them? Logan asked. Most of them. Some are for teaching, some are just for fun. They were fascinated by my small kitchen, where I actually cooked meals instead of ordering takeout or eating prepared food. They asked to see the bakery downstairs, where Miss Chen charmed them with stories about her family and let them help shape dinner rolls. "This is so cool," Logan said as we climbed back upstairs. "It's like living in a storybook." "Your aunt doesn't think so," I said carefully. "She thinks my apartment is too small." "Small doesn't mean bad," Mason replied with the wisdom of youth. "Some of the best things are small, like that museum membership you gave us. It's just a little card, but it opens up this huge world." That evening, Catherine picked the boys and accepted my invitation to stay for tea. We sat in my living room while Mason and Logan explored my neighborhood with Miss Chen, who had appointed herself their honorary grandmother for the evening. "They had a great time," Catherine said. "They've been asking when they can come back." "They're welcome anytime." "Rebecca, I owe you another apology." "For what now?" "For assuming that your life was smaller or less valuable because you have less money. Watching the boys here today, seeing how excited they were about everything, the bookshelf, the bakery, the way you know all your neighbors, I realized that you've built something I never have." "What's that?" "Community. Connection. A life where you're known and valued for who you are, not what you can afford." We sat quietly for a moment, listening to the sounds of my neighborhood, children playing in the courtyard behind the building, Mrs. Garcia practicing piano, the gentle hum of evening life. "I've been thinking about what you said at Christmas, about feeling invisible in our family. I think we all became so focused on achieving and acquiring that we forgot how to simply be with each other. It's not too late to change that. Isn't it? We're all so set in our patterns. Catherine, you came here today. You let your boys experience a different way of living. You're asking questions instead of making assumptions. That's change. 6 months later, our family gathered again for Thanksgiving. But this time, the gathering was at Mom and Dad's house, and everyone contributed something beyond expensive gifts. Michael brought photos he'd taken with his vintage Leica, black and white images from his travels that showed he was finally seeing the world through his own artistic lens, rather than just documenting places he had visited. Catherine brought a painting she had completed in her art class, a watercolor of the view from her kitchen window that captured something quiet and beautiful about ordinary moments.
The twins brought stories about their volunteer work at the museum and detailed knowledge about paleontology that impressed even Dad. I brought my students letters, thanking me for making learning fun, along with pictures from the state education conference where I had presented my curriculum work. Mom and Dad brought something even more valuable: questions. Real questions about our lives, our interests, our dreams beyond financial success or professional achievement. We still didn't have the same amount of money. Catherine and Derek still lived in their beautiful suburban house, and I still lived above Mrs. Chen's bakery. Michael still traveled for work, and I still packed lunch every day to save money. But we had learned to see each other clearly, without the filter of assumptions and expectations that had distorted our relationships for years. During dessert, Catherine raised her wine glass. "I want to make a toast to Rebecca." My face flushed. "Catherine, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. This past year, you taught all of us something important. You showed us that love isn't measured by how much you spend or what you can afford to give. It's measured by how much attention you pay, how much effort you make to truly know someone." She looked around the table at our family. Messy, imperfect, but finally honest. "Rebecca, you gave us gifts last Christmas that were worth more than their price tags because they showed us that you see who we really are. But more than that, you gave us the gift of standing up for yourself, of refusing to be invisible, of demanding that we do better." "To Rebecca," everyone echoed, raising their glasses. As I looked around the table at my family, really looked at them, without resentment or longing or the need to prove anything, I realized something that would have seemed impossible a year ago. I had everything I needed. Not because my circumstances had dramatically changed, not because I'd suddenly come into money or found financial security, but because I'd learned to value what I already had. I had work that mattered, a community that supported me, and a family that was finally learning to love me as I was rather than as they thought I should be. And for the first time in my adult life, that felt like more than enough. It felt like everything.
Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.